Welcome to a thought-provoking exploration of one of history's most intriguing mysteries. Join us on a captivating journey as we uncover the truth behind the fateful decision that changed the course of history. Why did Pontius Pilate have Jesus executed? In this compelling episode of The Man Who Killed Christ, we dive deep into the complex web of political power, religious tensions, and personal dilemmas that led to the crucifixion of Jesus. Was Pilate a ruthless oppressor, determined to eliminate a perceived threat? Or was he a conflicted figure, torn between his duty as a Roman prefect and his conscience? Get ready and stay tuned until the end for this extraordinary episode of The Man Who Killed Christ. Let's get started. In the year 26 AD, a soldier named Pontius Pilate was assigned to Judea with the task of bringing order to a troublesome Roman province. For a period of 10 years, he worked tirelessly to maintain control over a volatile population, quelling rebellions and crushing riots. However, Pilate's extensive career has been largely overshadowed by a single event, the trial and execution of Jesus. According to the accounts found in the Gospels, Pilate found Jesus guilty based on accusations made by the Jews, and then symbolically washed his hands of the entire matter. Yet, this portrayal of the trial overlooks the complex realities of Roman governance in Judea, failing to acknowledge Pilate's own motivations for getting rid of Jesus. Could it be that the biblical narrative misrepresents Pilate as a feeble ruler? When we turn to Greek and Roman historical sources, we discover a contrasting depiction of Pilate. He is portrayed as a harsh, resilient, and efficient figure. Pilate successfully governed a challenging province for a decade, an impressive tenure as a provincial governor. His administrative skills aligned with the principles of Roman rule. This is the story of Pontius Pilate, the man who killed Christ. Jerusalem, a city where various religions hold significant importance, is unfortunately burdened by deep-seated religious animosity. It was in this city 2 millennia ago that the trial of Jesus occurred, a consequential event that continues to fuel tensions between Christians and Jews. This trial followed the principles of Roman justice, in which a Roman prefect acted as judge to address an individual considered an adversary of Rome, resulting in a Roman punishment known as crucifixion. However, the prevailing narrative derived from the Gospel absolves Pontius Pilate of true responsibility. Instead, it implies that the Jews who surrounded Pilate's palace exerted pressure on him to carry out their undesirable task. Pilate posed the question, "What should I do then with Jesus who is called Christ?" The response he received was, "Crucify him." This incident also serves as the underlying cause of Christian anti-Semitism. The persecutions and violent outbreaks against Jews in medieval Europe, including the horrific Holocaust, can be traced back to the scene described in the book of Matthew, where Pilate symbolically washes his hands and the Jews willingly accept the burden of blood guilt, a curse that has haunted them ever since. At the center of this controversy lies Pontius Pilate, a crucial figure in the unfolding events. The concept of blood guilt hinges on the idea that Pilate succumbed to Jewish pressure, but the Romans had their own motives for executing Jesus. His trial was just one instance in a series of confrontations where a volatile population was suppressed by a stern and uncompromising prefect. Tacitus, a Roman historian, captured this sentiment when he wrote, "The Romans create a barren wasteland and call it peace." By 26 AD, Judea had been under Roman rule for approximately 20 years, yet it remained entrenched in a brutal phase of colonization. Pilate's predecessors had faced numerous uprisings fueled by tax rebellions. A generation later, Judea would explode in a full-fledged revolt. Pilate assumed his position with the objective of establishing Roman control and stability in the region, striving to achieve what was perceived as a state of peace by the Roman authorities. These are the remains of Caesarea, a city constructed by Herod the Great along the Mediterranean coast of Judea. Following Herod's demise, the Romans took control of Judea, and Caesarea became the headquarters of their empire in the region. Caesarea was a place of grandeur, adorned with baths, temples, and marble terraces, a Roman oasis amidst a land that was often hostile. Pontius Pilate resided here, leading a life separate from the Jewish populace he was tasked to govern. The Romans shared a notable tale about the Jews. When the Roman general Pompey sacked Jerusalem a century earlier, he stormed into the Temple of Solomon, seeking treasures to plunder and statues to demolish. However, he discovered an empty space, posing a perplexing question. How do you conquer a people who worship an unseen deity? Religion held great significance in Roman society, and as the prefect of Judea, Pilate held the prominent position of high priest in the Roman state church. His deep devotion to this faith shaped his thoughts and actions. The only surviving physical evidence of Pilate, aside from a few coins, is an inscription found in Caesarea, commemorating a temple constructed by Pilate in honor of his revered deity, Emperor Tiberius. His dedication to the imperial cult immediately put him at odds with the Jewish community he was appointed to govern. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing a mere 40 years after the events, documents what unfolded during that time. His portrayal of Pontius Pilate differs significantly from the depiction found in Christian tradition. According to Josephus, Pilate was not a leader who could be easily influenced by the crowd. Josephus recounts that Pilate's first action as prefect was to dispatch fresh troops to Jerusalem. However, the troops he selected provoked the Jewish people, as their standards displayed images of Emperor Tiberius, thereby violating the first and second commandments. You shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make for yourself a graven image. Josephus recounts the indignant response provoked by this affront to the laws of Moses. News quickly spread from Jerusalem to the surrounding countryside, igniting the anger of the Jewish population. A hostile crowd gathered and embarked on a march towards Caesarea, vehemently protesting against this violation of their cherished Jewish customs. It became a clash between two contrasting worldviews, and for 6 consecutive days, the protest persisted with the Jews encircling Pilate's residence. Pilate had underestimated the distinctiveness of Judea compared to other provinces within the empire. In other regions, it was common to worship the emperor alongside local deities, but the Jews were resolute in worshipping only their singular god. For Pilate to yield would be viewed as an insult directed at the emperor himself. Being primarily a soldier and secondarily a diplomat, Pilate opted for a confrontational approach. He called upon the crowd to gather in a stadium, where he positioned himself on an elevated platform, seemingly prepared to address their grievances. However, at his command, troops surrounded the Jewish protesters, employing a blatant display of intimidation. If the intention was to instill fear and disperse the crowd, the plan backfired. As Josephus describes, the Jews dropped to their knees, prepared to face death rather than violate their sacred laws. Concerned about the potential for a violent massacre, Pilate chose to exercise restraint. The clash at Caesarea left a lasting impact on Pilate, leading him to adopt a more diplomatic approach in navigating the complex landscape of Jewish sensitivities while upholding Roman law and order. By the year 29 AD, Judea was a nation yearning for liberation, eagerly anticipating the fulfillment of ancient Jewish prophecies regarding freedom under the divine rule of God. Just north of Judea lay the Galilee, a province notorious for its rebellious tendencies, where the term Galilean itself was synonymous with being a troublemaker. It was in this region that a rabbi emerged, soon to come under the watchful gaze of Pontius Pilate. This rabbi preached about the imminent arrival of the kingdom of God, and in his own unique way embodied a spirit of revolution. In the Gospels, Pilate's role in Jesus' narrative is relatively minor. However, according to Josephus's account, the situation is quite the opposite. Jesus was not the first individual to be regarded as a Messiah. Josephus enumerates several figures preceding Jesus who had captured the aspirations of the Jewish people. These included Simon Athranges, a shepherd slave, Judas the Galilean, and John the Baptist. Each of them had posed a challenge to the ruling elite and met their demise, either at the hands of the Romans or their Herodian collaborators. During Pilate's time, the Galilee functioned as a subordinate kingdom under Roman authority. The responsibility for maintaining order in that region was entrusted to Herod Antipas, the second son of Herod the Great. According to Luke's account, Pilate and Herod did not share a cordial relationship, although the specific reasons for their animosity are not provided. Pilate expected Herod to address any local troublemakers. However, unlike John the Baptist, Jesus managed to evade capture by Herod, allowing him to journey into Pilate's jurisdiction. On 5 occasions, he traveled south to Jerusalem for religious festivals, thereby becoming a direct concern for Pilate. Pilate made it a point to visit Jerusalem 3 times a year, specifically to oversee the volatile feast days. During these visits, he would bring additional troops to strengthen the garrison stationed in the city. Josephus recounts the hostile reception Pilate encountered on these peacekeeping trips to Jerusalem. He describes how crowds would surround Pilate upon his arrival, bombarding him with furious protests. Pilate realized that he needed a strategy beyond mere force to keep the crowd under control. To tackle this challenge, Pilate employed a well-established tactic employed by prefects throughout the empire, forming alliances with the local aristocracy, who naturally held influence over the crowd. In Pilate's case, this meant collaborating with the temple priests. However, Pilate faced a predicament because the people's loyalty to the priests was strained. The crowd resented the priests' collaboration with the Romans, and this popular discontent was further fueled by the arrival of the Galileans and their unconventional Messiah figure, Jesus, in Jerusalem. Jesus never directly preached against the Romans, but he did confront and criticize the temple priests, who were allies of Pilate. He denounced them as hypocrites and roused the crowd by challenging the authority of this Jewish elite. According to the Gospel of John, there is a scene where furious priests lash out at Jesus for his audacity and incite the crowd to stone him. It was Pilate's responsibility to handle such incidents and take action against anyone who posed a threat to the established order. In Josephus's account, there is an incident that demonstrates Pilate's response to public disorder. Pilate had appropriated temple funds to construct an aqueduct, which angered the crowd due to the collaboration between Pilate and the temple elite. They surrounded the prefect's palace, demanding justice. With the priests compromised, the task of maintaining order fell upon Pilate. He resorted to brutal measures, in stark contrast to the portrayal of Pilate in the Gospels. He instructed his soldiers to disguise themselves as civilians by wearing Jewish garments instead of carrying swords. They wielded wooden clubs instead. Outside, the crowd's anger had escalated into a riot, with Josephus describing it as a torrent of abuse. Pilate gave the signal, and his undercover troops swiftly intervened, singling out the troublemakers, using clubs against some and arresting others. Caught off guard by this premeditated attack, the Jews retreated, bringing an end to the uprising. The aqueduct riot is not explicitly mentioned in the Gospels, but there are subtle indications pointing to those events. In Luke's account, there is a mention of Galileans whose blood Pilate mixed with their sacrifices. Additionally, there is the figure of Barabbas, who later appears in the trial of Christ, where Pilate offers him to the crowd as part of a Passover amnesty. According to Mark, Barabbas had participated in the uprising and had caused someone's death. These references provide veiled glimpses into the violent nature of Roman rule in Judea and Pilate's willingness to carry out brutal acts on behalf of the empire. As another holy festival, Passover, approached, pilgrims would once again flock to Jerusalem, placing Pilate in a position of power. However, this time, the target of his authority would be Jesus, who would become the victim of the unfolding events. Josephus provides only a brief account of the events surrounding Jesus. He describes Jesus as someone who performed remarkable deeds and taught the people. Pilate condemned him to death by crucifixion. Josephus notes that even after Jesus' death, those who had previously loved him continued to do so, and the community of Christians has endured to this day. Josephus wrote his account around 40 years after Jesus' death, coinciding with the compilation of the first Gospels. These Gospels preserved the memories of individuals who had followed Jesus and provided detailed descriptions of the events that occurred during 1 week in the rule of Pontius Pilate. According to modern scholars, these events took place during the Passover season in the year 30 AD. In that week, Jesus the Rabbi openly presented himself as the Messiah. His entry into Jerusalem on a donkey carried significant symbolic meaning. The crowd recognized it as a fulfillment of ancient prophecies, wherein the king would arrive in such a manner. This act posed a challenge to all earthly authorities. Subsequently, Jesus went to the temple, which was the center of power for Pilate's Jewish allies. It was there that he confronted the money changers, who performed a religious role by exchanging impure pagan coins. By targeting them, Jesus was indirectly challenging the authority of the temple itself. Had the commotion within the temple courtyard remained hidden from the Romans, it would have likely stayed as an internal Jewish matter. However, the Antonia fortress overlooked the temple, presenting a predicament for the priests. They wanted Pilate, their ally, to handle the situation involving Jesus, but it had to be done on their terms. If news of the disturbance reached Pilate, and he hastily responded by sending troops, the outcome would be catastrophic. The worship of the one true God was not only the responsibility of the chosen people, but it held significance for all of humanity, extending beyond the borders of Israel. Any disruption to this ancient ritual would upset the delicate balance between God and humankind, carrying cosmic implications. Jesus presented an alternative path to God, and his alleged blasphemy posed a threat to the smooth observance of the Passover. It was crucial to address the matter of Jesus as soon as possible, but it had to be done outside the temple grounds. According to Josephus, Pilate condemned Jesus based on accusations made by prominent individuals within our community. There is no doubt that the temple aristocracy played a role in Jesus' death. However, throughout centuries of Christian tradition, this fact has been dangerously blurred, leading to the unjust condemnation of all Jews due to the actions of the temple elite. At a certain point, Pilate and the priests reached an agreement, devising plans to apprehend Jesus during the night, away from the temple and beyond the sight of the crowd. Pilate's motives are evident. Jesus was seen as a troublemaker who undermined the temple allies and posed a threat to the peaceful observance of the Passover. However, it was primarily the title of Messiah that provoked Pilate. The term Messiah referred to the Anointed One, Jesus as the King of the Jews. This title directly challenged Pilate's authority. During the events at Gethsemane that night, the temple guards were not acting independently. According to John's Gospel, there were also Roman soldiers present, referred to as a cohort. The Greek term indicates a group of 500 Roman troops. It might be an exaggeration, but it aligns with the image of Pilate depicted by Josephus, an authoritative military prefect determined to suppress civil unrest. The following day, Pilate would conduct Jesus' trial and execute him according to Roman law. This act aimed to set an example for all those who dared to question the authority of Rome. During the Passover in the year 30 AD, Pontius Pilate made the decision to crucify a man whose following would eventually spread throughout the Roman Empire. The morning of the trial holds a significant place in Pilate's life, as it marks a compelling moment when fate had its grip on him. Nevertheless, Pilate would have risen as if it were any ordinary workday. After washing and dressing, he would have performed his personal religious rituals, offering incense and prayers, just like any other Roman starting their day. It is astonishing to think that on this seemingly regular day for Pilate, he would encounter a calamitous meeting that would profoundly alter history. According to the Gospels, Jesus spent the hours leading up to his trial in the presence of Caiaphas, the high priest. These accounts present several scenes that cast a negative light on the Jewish people and depict their disdainful actions, tearing their robes in contempt. While Caiaphas, the high priest, had genuine spiritual reasons to address the alleged blasphemer, he lacked the authority to order his execution. The only person possessing both the motive and the power to ensure Jesus' demise was Pontius Pilate. In John's version of the trial, the priests opted to remain outside the palace to maintain their ceremonial purity for the upcoming feast. Pilate stepped out to meet them and immediately initiated a display of power. "Take him yourselves," he suggested, "and judge him according to your own law." However, the Jews pointed out that they lacked the authority to execute anyone. With his authority established, Pilate returned to the palace and summoned the prisoner for a private conversation, excluding the priests from the proceedings governed by Roman law. When Pilate called Jesus to him, an extraordinary encounter unfolded between the Roman governor and Jesus. On one side, there stood the embodiment of Roman power, while on the other side stood Jesus, seemingly a common criminal in Pilate's eyes. Their dialogue was remarkable, as Pilate persisted with questions while Jesus responded with answers that went beyond the immediate queries. The meeting represented a collision of two worlds, but they failed to truly connect or comprehend one another. Pilate inquired of Jesus, "Do you know what they are accusing you of? Are you truly the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "If I were an earthly king, my followers would have fought to prevent my arrest, but my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate continued to probe, asking, "So, are you a king then?" Jesus replied, "I was born for this purpose. I came into the world to bear witness to the truth." Pilate, perplexed, questioned, "What is truth?" Jesus had become a perceived threat to the empire, making it necessary for Pilate to eliminate him. However, Pilate also saw an opportunity to manipulate Jesus as a tool against the Jews. Pilate returned to the priests and continued his questioning. They recounted the troubles Jesus had caused, even mentioning his actions in Galilee. As a result, Pilate decided to send Jesus to Herod Antipas. In Christian tradition, this act is often portrayed as a sign of Pilate's weakness, as if he were evading responsibility. However, an alternative perspective reveals that Pilate may have viewed this as a chance to mend a strained relationship with Herod by involving him in the governance of Judea. It was an opportunity to regain an important ally. This move proved successful, as Herod questioned Jesus out of curiosity and then sent him back to Pilate. According to Luke's account, their interaction led to a newfound friendship. Pilate, however, had even more to gain from the trial. He saw it as an opportunity to solidify his authority over the Jewish people, including the priests and the crowd. Pilate orchestrated a theatrical scene, using the prisoner Barabbas, who had been arrested during a previous disturbance, as bait. Pilate presented the crowd with a choice, following the custom of releasing one prisoner during the Passover. He asked them, "Shall I release Barabbas or the King of the Jews?" Pilate skillfully manipulated the diverse motives of the crowd to his advantage. The priests and devout Jews, influenced by the priests' opinions, called for Barabbas's release. Others saw Barabbas as a more active freedom fighter than Jesus ever was, and believed he was worth saving. Pilate's cunning move came in provoking the crowd with the notion of kingship. He questioned whether this lowly and insignificant individual could be their king. His contemptuous approach encouraged betrayal. Pilate seizes an opportunity to make it abundantly clear that the Jewish people will never have a recognized king of the Jews. He repeatedly asks them, "What should I do with the King of the Jews?" each time he uses that title. Their response of, "Crucify him," forces them to acknowledge that they lack ultimate power, and that no king of the Jews can emerge. In essence, Pilate compels them to admit, as stated in the Gospel account, "We have no king but Caesar. Should I crucify your king?" Ultimately, Pilate emerges victorious. He not only succeeds in getting rid of Jesus, whom he viewed as a troublemaker and wanted gone, but he also manipulates the chief priests into making a damning declaration that they recognize no king other than Caesar. All in all, it was a productive day's work for Pilate. This interpretation of the trial presents a version of history that aligns with Josephus's portrayal of a strong and decisive prefect. However, the Gospels provide glimpses of a different side to Pilate, a troubled governor plagued by the notion that his accused might be innocent. There is even mention of a letter from his wife during the trial, who had a dream about the righteous man. In this version, Pilate is depicted as a reluctant Gentile who senses the divinity of Christ but is coerced by the Jews into ordering his execution. The truth is, Pilate dealt with Jesus in a manner similar to how governors across the empire handled rebels. By putting the Messiah to death, it reinforced Rome's authority. Jesus was not the first troublemaker Pilate had encountered, nor would he be the last. 5 years later, another Messiah challenged Pilate, this time a prophet from Samaria. According to Josephus, Pilate dispatched troops to quell the rebellion, resulting in the prophet and his followers being mercilessly slaughtered. This was the fate of those who defied Rome. Their claims of kingship were ridiculed, and their bodies were brutally mutilated. Even during the crucifixion of Jesus, he was not alone. 2 other men were executed alongside him, not thieves as commonly believed, but rebels according to the gospel. Crucifixion was a punishment employed by the Romans for slaves and those who dared challenge their power. It was a method of humiliation, ensuring a public spectacle where the condemned were stripped, bound to a wooden cross, and left in a position of ultimate powerlessness. Crucifixion served as a public and political statement, demonstrating the Romans' authority to capture and crucify anyone who challenged them. The inscription affixed to the cross was Pilate's final act of scorn, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." The priests protested and requested it to be changed to indicate that Jesus claimed to be the King of the Jews. However, Pilate defiantly responded, "What I have written, I have written." This inscription was a deliberate insult directed at the entire Jewish nation. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope this video has been insightful and encouraging. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who have similar interests. Also, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and any other biblical topics you'd like us to explore in future videos. Until next time, may the hope of resurrection and the assurance of God's power over death bring you comfort and strength. God bless you.